program is being brought to you on the Voice America Variety Channel. For more information about our network and to check our additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericavariety.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Welcome to Boroughs and Burbs with hosts John Engel and Roberto Cabrera. Over the next hour, you're going to learn some insider knowledge that will help you overcome and strategize in the cutthroat world of real estate. Now, here are your hosts, John and Roberto.
Welcome, everybody. Boroughs and Burbs 87. I'm John Engel of Douglas Elliman in Connecticut, and that's my co-host on 75th and Columbus, world headquarters for Boroughs and Burbs. Roberto Cabrera, say hi.
Hello. Thank you, John. Good to see you.
And my other special guest this week, Sheila D. Simmons in Brentwood, Los Angeles. Say hi.
Hello.
Now, Sheila and I met, and she said, you ought to do a show on Brentwood. And I said, Brentwood? That's just a neighborhood in Los Angeles. And she said, no, it's a lot more. And I said, what are we going to talk about? The rich and famous in Brentwood? We all on the East Coast think about Brentwood as the place where OJ lives. And she said, no, that's a 20-year-old story. Brentwood is so much more. And I said, well, I know the Getty is there. And she said, yeah, the Getty is is one example of great design in Brentwood. We should put together a show on the mid-century modern roots of Brentwood and how that tradition has continued into the present day. And I'm going to find you two the most extraordinary architects of that modern movement, both the restoration of mid-century modern in Brentwood and the modern houses that they're doing now in Brentwood. And we're going to talk about what makes Brentwood as a neighborhood different from all the other neighborhoods in LA. Did I get that right, Sheila?
That's correct, John. Are you ready for me to take over for just a moment?
Yeah, I want you to introduce these special architects.
Okay. Our architects are from Enclosures Architectures, and they are Scott Strummeyer and Tosh Rabeyer. Did I say that correctly?
Scott Strumwasser and Tosh Rabar.
Okay, so I have not met them personally, but I will say they came recommended from one of my clients, and my client is an MCM enthusiast, so I knew that they were top rated. What I do want to say about Brentwood, before we get started on the MCM aspect, I have to give you our market update for April. So our median sold price here is 3.4 million. Price per square foot is 1,695, and properties on the market right now are 114 homes for sale. Now, what I will say about Brentwood that is kind of a myth. Everyone thinks that we have these huge homes and everything is, a gated community. That's not necessarily true. People like Brentwood because we are on the west side. We're west side of the 405 freeway. But what people don't understand is we have a Mayberry feel. It's a small, idyllic neighborhood. Our main thoroughfare is San Vicente Boulevard. And it's a coral tree line street that houses most of the businesses along San Vicente, including our Douglas Elliman headquarters here in Brentwood. But I cannot say enough about our shops, our local businesses, our restaurants, but the neighborhood, it lends itself to a healthy outdoor lifestyle, but it's unassuming, it's idyllic, and people do not expect that when they come to Brentwood. They think that, we're Beverly Hills. We're not Beverly Hills. We have the same cachet, but I would tell you, I think we do have higher net worth here than Beverly Hills, but people like it because it's, it's a small, quaint neighborhood. And
Sheila, can I just ask you to give us a little perspective on just those 3 or 4 numbers that you gave us, because those numbers are in a vacuum. I don't understand what those mean. Like how how has that changed since, say, pre-COVID? Are the numbers down, up, sideways?
So I'll give you year over year. So for April 2022, we are up 5.4% in the median price. So people think that, the market's getting ready to crash. It's not crashing here in Brentwood. As far as the price per square foot, let me see here. Yes, we're up 21% from last year.
How about the inventory numbers? You said 105 available or something?
114. We are down two homes from last year. So last year was 116. This year we're at 114. And days on the market are 37. Last year is 29. So we are, it's sitting for just a few more days, another week or so. But people think we're crashing. We're not crashing. So the only problem that we have right now is we do have low inventory and we need more sellers. So if you have an inclination to sell, please call me.
So when I look at the map here, I see Crestwood Hills looks like a big section, physically about half of all of Brentwood. And then you have Brentwood Park, Brentwood Heights, Brentwood, and Westgate. Those seem to be the areas but Crestwood Hills dominates with about 50% of the total area. Is that right?
That's correct. And this is where I will let Scott take over.
Okay, go ahead, Scott.
And here I go. Well, I am Scott Strumwasser, sitting here with my partner, Tosh Rabar. We are architects, and we have a firm that's been established for several decades now. My connection to all of this is that I was actually born and raised in Brentwood. So I'm very familiar with that neighborhood, and I think Sheila characterizes the community well. It is a kind of unassuming place with it's a very livable and kind of wonderful place to be and to grow up. The Crestwood Hills area specifically is a canyon that goes up north of Sunset Boulevard and houses some really quite beautiful or has some quite beautiful homes. The Crestwood Hills area specifically was developed by a handful of musicians, actually, who wanted to build some homes that were affordable and that were architecturally sensible, and they actually created a mutual housing association, and I think they were in the business of making some money, but they were also very responsible about how they were going to develop these properties.
What year was that, Scott, more or less?
That was in and around the 50s. Okay. And they actually developed not only a series of homes, but they developed a nursery school that I attended. And there's something called Crestwood Hills Park, which was the place I went to every day. And it's up in the hills, and it's very beautiful and very idyllic. But they were very interested in using, architects and contemporary architects and develop these properties. You're looking at a home right now that one of the models of it is one that looks very much like that. That was one of our first projects as young professionals that we restored and remodeled. So they really were interested in sharing contemporary ideas and taking advantage of the sites that were really quite beautiful.
I'm going to interject. There's a part that's missing, a part of the history of Crestwood Hills, is that most of the people that developed this area were musicians, but they also were immigrants that came from Europe. And the idea of creating a home that is much more egalitarian than it's available, they created a society, they created a community where people in that neighborhood could go to the neighborhood school and the park, and it was much more available. It wasn't gated, but it was something that was nestled under the trees. So it was that kind of a thinking that came into this area that wasn't there before. So that's what I want to just contribute to that.
So who's moving to Brentwood now and why? I mean, when I think, okay, if I've got my new big job in LA and I can go to Malibu, I can go to Beverly Hills, I can go anywhere I want. But a lot of the people who can go anywhere choose Brentwood. Why?
Partly it's location. It's close to the beach. It's close to the freeway where you can 405, where you can, if there is no traffic, you can get to other parts of the city. So it's well located. It's beautiful. It's beautifully landscaped. And
I think it's a little bit under the radar too, because Malibu has all these things associated with it. And it's also, Malibu is a sort of isolated part of the city. If you want to be isolated, that's a good place to be. Beverly Hills has its character but Brentwood is a little bit under, Sheila, you tell me if I'm right about this. It's a little under the radar.
It is under the radar, John. And I will tell you what I have found in real estate, families want to move here. I have people who call me from Palm Springs and say, I want my daughter, in school. So we're going to buy. And I would tell you once when I had a listing here, I took my signs to Malibu. I drove them to Malibu, placed them. And sure enough, I got Malibu residents who wanted to purchase here because of the schools. So I think, families, first-time home buyers, I'm not sure. I mean, there's South Brentwood, which is the condo section, but I think it's, those people who have an expanding family.
What about Bel Air?
I hear, okay, so I know a celebrity client who lived in Bel Air, and they said they loved Bel Air, but it's hilly there. I have to tell you, there are a lot of hills, and you don't think about that, but I think that once you tour those homes and you get up in those streets, and your GPS crashes, and you realize what a chore it can be driving up and down. But I mean, Bel Air is beautiful. I mean, who doesn't love Bel Air?
But so the topography of Brentwood is moderately flat.
no.
Not really, but it's just a little bit easier to navigate Brentwood, and also Brentwood has what Sheila was talking about. It has the San Vicente Boulevard, which is, that is literally a place I would get on my bicycle as a child and ride my bike to San Vicente Boulevard and go to the hobby shop. And I mean, it was Mayberry. It was, and it's not that anymore, but it still is in some ways. It is the community of Brentwood, and Bel Air doesn't really have that. And it is this sort of small town within a very big town, and it's more unassuming, and it's also off to the corner, being north of Sunset like that. Bel Air is that way too, but it's a little bit more accessible. I walked a half a block to school when I was a child, to my grade school. It's a kind of special place. It's got this notoriety because of a certain football player, but it really is a very comfortable kind of place to be. And also one other thing, because I just don't want to neglect this part of it. We've talked a little bit about it, but there is a sensibility about architecture in Brentwood, and that there are quite a few very interesting and very sensitively designed, because of topography issues and because of view issues, buildings within Brentwood, for which I think Brentwood takes a lot of pride. And folks that have a kind of interest in that and have a sensitivity about, building homes that are built that have this kind of attention to where they are and their context is very evident in Brentwood. And it's something for that I think really gives it a lot of value in communities like Malibu and Bel Air and in In Beverly Hills, you get more, there's some sort of extravagances there that you don't find as much of in Brentwood, but you find some very, very beautiful pieces of architecture, some from this mid-century period and newer ones that realize where they are and build that way.
So let's talk about modern architecture. And let me just give you my perspective, and then I want to hear the California perspective. From my perspective, World War II ends and the country is basically starting over. It's got to create a lot of housing, and it's got to create it quickly and inexpensively. And there was an opportunity, I guess, for this modern movement to begin in the 50s. In the East, we have the Harvard Five. You have the Harvard Five come out of Harvard with Marcel Breuer, Philip Johnson, Johansson, Elliot Noyes, and they come to New Canaan when Philip Johnson gets the job at the Museum of Modern Art. He gets the first job running the architecture department. And they come out here and they do, I think there's 90 of them here in New Canaan. And they are characterized as glass boxes. The most famous of these is the Philip Johnson glass house. And here's a photo of it right here. So this is what we see in New Canaan, and this is the highest in New Canaan is the highest concentration in the Northeast of mid-century modern. So we talk about the Harvard Five in this area. When we talk about Brentwood, there's a whole different vocabulary. There's a whole different set of designers. I keep hearing the same names coming up. Neutra, Neutra, Neutra. I keep hearing, who are the other names? Help me out.
Schindler and Quincy Jones, Gregory Ain. These are the Irving Gill is a little earlier. But yeah, we have our 5 or 10 or however many that were part of and
Skinner.
Yeah, here's an example. Why don't you talk about this project?
This was built in 1957.
Correct.
By Wilkes. That's his name. We just restored it a year ago. Didn't add anything to it at all. It was already all there. We just had to upgrade it to 21st century needs. Nothing had been done to it since the original time that was built. So this house is in Beverly Hills, which is a different setting, but similar to what has gone on in Brentwood. This is the same time that these houses were being built all over Los Angeles. You know, what you hear about a ranch style house or a post and beam house, these are reiteration of Neutra and Schindler, which were doing work in the early 20s. And so this is 30 years later that it's being understood by younger architects at the time that were actually studying and working for Neutra and Schindler. And then they started to do their own work. And so you can see all the students do very interesting but similar work around the city. Quincy Jones, Alan Ashen, all those architects were influenced by Neutra and Schindler.
How do I know that these are LA mid-century modern? How do I know that these aren't in New Canaan?
The wood post and beam is, well, it's not necessarily just LA, it's Northern California as well. Post and beam wood construction is very much LA. You don't really, on the East Coast, this wouldn't survive the weather. You have, is
that the reason why the floors are like cement or terrazzo, or I mean, I see no wood floors.
Okay, the issue, one of the most brilliant thing that these architects at the time did, they were introduced to radiant heating, and these homes have all had radiant heating, and to do that, it's best to do it with concrete slab, and is the best heating for these homes. You know, it doesn't blow forced air heating, it blows on you, it's terrible, it's splotchy, and you know, you get it in some place in a house, don't get it in another place. This is very continuous and consistent, and it's perfect for this environment because we don't have that much temperature difference from winter to summer.
We have a lot more flexibility in what we do here because exactly what Tasha's saying. Our climatic conditions allow us to make, in this photograph, you can see we've actually created a room in which you can pull all the doors back, and now it's an outdoor patio, but you can pull some doors in and it's an enclosed space. But we're not fighting climatic conditions here. So we're very much can really push the envelope, if you will, of the connection of inside and outside and really make it indistinguishable. So the other part of, you know, building on a slab as opposed to a raised floor is that, you know, part of, and going back to the idea about, you know, post-war, is that they wanted to build homes economically, albeit this is a home in Beverly Hills, but when they were building homes economically, they could build a slab on grade, and it was a very quick and inexpensive way to build homes very, very quickly. And it had other aspects to it, this idea of the radiant heating and the like. And there's just a lot of very clever things that were done. There's a lot of attention to the idea of making inside and outside indistinguishable in contemporary homes in Los Angeles and Southern California.
And actually deal with energy and passive solar, having overhangs, having, you know, shading the windows as opposed to putting curtains on windows, you know, doing a lot of passive architectural moves that would make the house be just like a tent. You know, it's just a roof above you and everything else is open. And those were, you know, you could only do that in an environment where you could have glass, so much glass, and not worry about freezing in the wintertime. So
there's also another historical thing. I won't belabor all of this, but John was talking about post-war, and we're trying to kind of put a timeline on all of this. So these two names, Schindler and Neutra, they're really the most important European modernists that came to the United States. And Schindler, we're looking now at I'm glad you're showing this. So Rudolf Schindler was a Viennese architect who saw the work that Frank Lloyd Wright was doing, decided to come to the United States to work with Wright, and he ultimately did, and ultimately went on his own, and shockingly, and to our great benefit, ended up in Los Angeles, California. This Viennese modernist architect ended up in Los Angeles, California. He built many, many buildings. He was a student of Frank Lloyd Wright's. He, some say, did better work than Frank Lloyd Wright. This is a 16-unit apartment building that Tosh and I had the privilege, we're still at it, of restoring. That's a Rudolf Schindler apartment complex built in between 1926 and 39 or 55. There's 5 buildings on a site. We're in the process. We've restored 3 of the buildings. There's 2 more buildings to restore. This was just a magnificent place. But it's these ideas that were literally through Wright and through some of the European modernists who came here, were interpreted by the architects of the 50s and of the 60s that became the mid-century modern. This is the source of these things. And California permitted so much freedom to explore these things because climatically we were able to really open up a house and use these modern plans. And they can also be done very economically too, relating to the sort of post-war housing boom. The photographs you're seeing now are very, it's a very eclectic a collection of these 5 different buildings with 16 apartment units that are all different. But this is sort of, some of these buildings were existing buildings that Schindler renovated and turned into his own. But there's just a lot of creativity and excitement and cleverness about the way fenestration was handled, and they've become, in Southern California, a very sought after architecture. Sheila can speak to this. You know, if a Neutra house comes up for sale, it's a feeding frenzy. There are so many people out there.
Right. Is this in Truesdale Estates, or the one that you were talking about in Beverly Hills? Was that in Truesdale Estates?
The one that was, it's I don't know if that's considered Truesdale. It's north of Sunset. I don't think it's Truesdale. It's
But okay, like let's look at this. This is Schindler, 1926. Now, Schindler was new to wood construction. He learned that he could use plywood. He can use, you know, he's in a new world now. He's using plywood and wood for the entire interior of this 300 square foot apartment unit. So, you know, from there, the younger architects interpreted his ideas of wood ceiling, incorporating light, you know, using the space between joists and roof rafters for lights, and really understanding wood construction in a more expressive way, as opposed to how we do it now, where we cover everything with drywall. You know, he wanted to show how the skeleton of a wood construction would work, and therefore comes the post and beam California architecture, where it takes from this, I would call it the father of California architecture, and then you can see the relationship, where from this it goes to ranch houses or post and beam homes, where, you know, things are exposed and expressed.
By the way, this apartment, it's called Manola Court. It's in the Silver Lake area, up on a hillside with beautiful views of.
Now you can see, you know, how the wood construct. These are his ideas about exposing wood and showing it, you know, wood studs on the outside of the building. You know, these are not, it's a very different way of thinking about wood construction than we do now. So
What type of wood is that? What sort of durability is there?
Doesn't have any.
It's Douglas fir. It needs to be, these buildings need to be cared for. It had been neglected for years and years. These are buildings that absolutely need to be cared for. And as long as we're around, we're going to make sure they are.
Yeah, this one, you know, it had to be painted and it had to be sanded up, you know, everything had to be redone, but it withstood about 85 years. I mean, go ahead.
It's pine, right? I mean, we're
Yes,
looking at
Douglas
plywood.
Douglas
and pine.
fir, yes, it's pine,
Douglas
but
fir.
it's a little harder, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not much.
John, just an FYI, Silver Lake is a popular area as well. It's an artist haven, and there's a lot of MCM architecture in that area, and it's very beautiful and it's in demand.
And where is that geographically with regards to Brentwood itself?
It's east.
It's
close.
north of downtown.
It's northwest of downtown. It's a 10-minute drive to downtown, but it's also up. It also is up in the hills, so it affords every apartment unit has a view of the Hollywood sign and the Griffith Observatory, and it's a very nice community.
Is it on the map I'm showing?
It will be.
It's to your right. It's
Yes,
to your right, close to downtown. If you get to downtown, you'll be close.
Okay.
Where it says
Griffith
Los Angeles.
Park,
Yeah, Griffith Park. Just
Okay, you
below
see where
Griffith
that
Park.
lake is? Do you
Yeah.
see where that, hold on. You
By
see
Dodger Stadium.
Yes.
you see that little lake?
Yeah, there's Silver Lake. It says it on the map. It said it on the map there. Right underneath the lake, it says Silver Lake.
Okay.
And John, FYI, we here at Douglas Elliman have several listings in MCM listings in Truesdale Estates and in Silver Lake. So
Are people willing to pay up for it? Is it considered an art house, and does it add value to the per square foot to be an MCM, to have a name brand architect.
It does, because you have an appreciation. You have the clients who are cultured and who appreciate that style, and they understand the style, as you know, such as yourself. You understand the style. You have.
So I'm going to put you on the spot because you're a professional and you're supposed to know these things. But so if I have an ordinary modern or I have a Neutra, what does it add to the value? If I have an ordinary modern or I have a Schindler, what does it add?
I would just throw a number out there. I'll say it'll go up 60% in value if you have a name like Neutra attached. I mean, you have, you know, the Chemisphere House, you have the Stahl House. There are many pockets of MCM architecture here. So this, we just had, you know, a small area here in Brentwood, but it's throughout LA, and there are just many, many iconic homes. But I would say it would add 60%.
That's a big number.
It is a big number, but you know, when you say modern homes, and so, you know, modern, people want, you're in LA, people want the name. It is just, you know, what it is.
But by the way, this Frank Lloyd Wright house just came on in New Canaan yesterday. This is the Rayford house of 56. And it just came on the market yesterday. And just to give you a sense, for $8 million. Now, the average house in New Canaan is $2 million. And that house is $8 million because it's a Frank Lloyd Wright. I would say
how big is the house? How big is the land? Like, give me some perspective on that.
On that one?
Yeah.
That probably had 8 acres. I think they sold the others at the time. I think they've sold off most of it. I think it's down to 2 to 4 acres, and they've sold off the other lots.
And so, interior, like number of bedrooms. I mean, just like practical stuff. Just curious. No one's buying it for practicality.
There's nothing practical about that.
It's like buying a Picasso because, you know, it's, you know, a certain size, and I don't know.
And by the way, Frank Lloyd Wright's interest in doing a lot of wood is almost unique on that house. There's a lot of concrete. So the Rayford house of 56, lots of concrete, although Frank Lloyd Wright always added overhangs and wood. It's one of the things that Scott was just showing me, the overhangs, I think is distinctly Californian. We don't have the overhangs, for instance, on the glass house. And here's the most recent version. And this is my segue, Roberto, to my sponsor. Grace Farms just made this beautiful modern building. It's called the River Building. That's it from the sky. You see, it's got a shiny silver roof, and it stretches about a 1/4 mile down the hill. Grace Farms is our sponsor, and they sponsor this show because they're interested in design for freedom, sustainable, ethical building materials. And I want to talk in a minute about that. But this is the newest modern architecture that we have east. And once again, there's not a lot of interest in wood. There's an interest in glass, and there's an interest in open plan, but we don't do predominantly wood like you do in California.
You know, it's much more difficult to build a mid-century modern house now in California because we have many more regulations for earthquake, and we have to have a lot of steel connections and wrap it in wood if we want to make it look like wood. So the houses that were built in the 40s, 50s, and 60s are almost impossible to build right now. So one of the reasons they are so much sought after is because you can't really get them anymore.
Does your planning and zoning make allowances for the historical value of these homes?
Well, they have to be designated, and a lot of times we do things that, you know, they don't know anything about. But yes, we have to, yes. Like the Schindler property that we just showed you, it's a historic building, and we had a lot of things that we had to get around was because, you know, the building had no structure. Literally, what was holding it up, we don't know. We had to put in a lot of steel to make it and still make it look like it used to look like. So mid-century modern homes are very difficult to build right now. At the, Scott's father built their house in 1957, 8.
57, 58, yeah.
They bought the lot and the house for $40,000. They built it from scratch.
In Brentwood, yeah.
Now,
Now-
obviously that's 65 years ago, but even if you add inflation and all of that stuff, you just can't build that house
Yeah.
anymore for those prices.
And that's now we're looking at another house, but I was going to just mention that the whole discussion that Tosh is bringing up here about the structure and everything is another discussion about mid-century modern and the like. The ironic thing, of course, is that all of these homes that are put together with little sticks and little metal nails have withstood multiple earthquakes and done very, very well. So in spite of all the additional requirements that we have that make it so difficult to build these mid-century type post and beam buildings now, they do very, very well in our environment of earthquakes.
The glass may shatter, but
Yeah, well, but we have tempered glass now, so
Yeah. well, you can go back to that other post and beam house that you had up.
just yeah.
And so this is designed by Quincy Jones. I don't know if you're familiar with this particular developer in the 60s who was also, his name is
Joseph Eichler.
Joseph Eichler. He used to live in a Frank Lloyd Wright house. And when he moved to California, he decided that he wanted to build similar houses. So he hired young architects like Ashton Allen and Quincy Jones and designed developments in City of Orange, which is in Orange County, in Thousand Oaks, and mostly in Northern California, in all over Northern California. There are many more developments there.
So this is a house that we bought
Okay.
years
Yeah.
ago.
This is in Thousand Oaks, and you can see it's, post and beam to its true name. But again, if we were to design this house now, we would have to put a hell of a lot of steel in it. But this house has withstood a lot of earthquakes already.
Let me ask you a question. Let's just say I came to you, I said, look, I bought this piece of land, I have an acre here or whatever it is in Brentwood, and I want to build a house, and I'm conflicted. I really, my wife wants me to buy, to build a traditional house, but I really, really, really want to build and design a mid-century home. And, the budget is $3 million. If it's $3 million for a traditional house, does it cost $4.5 million to build a mid-century modern house?
To give you an example, the Beverly Hills house that we restored earlier, we didn't add a square inch. We remodeled the entire house, obviously with very high-end material. They spent $4 million.
It's a
Okay,
4,200 square foot house.
Okay, but there's a qualification.
To build
You're restoring that house. I'm saying ground up.
Ground up, $3 million. How many square feet?
Well, let's just say that same house. You spent $4.5 million
You
restoring it.
couldn't. No,
You couldn't build that house.
no.
If I said, look, why can't you build it?
Well, you can build it. But,
Well, you need more money.
Okay, but I'm just, so what would that cost? What would it cost?
well, I don't think the additional cost is 50% more. I think it's it might be 20% more to build it that way. And we've been, as architects, we have been, Roberto, we've been very much influenced by all this experience and how I grew up and the neighborhood that I grew up in. And when we design new homes, we tend towards mid-century modern kind of aesthetics and
What you can say.
projects. And I think they're competitive. If you go down this list, you'll see a new home that we designed.
No.
Keep going. It's, I think, oh, there it is. The West Side Residence. So that's a house that's in design now in our office. So there's some definite influences of mid-century modern. There's overhangs, there's large glass expanses.
But you lost the wood, no wood.
No, actually, it's painted. There is wood.
Yeah. So, and this is the front of this house, and this is going to be, this is going to be a $3 million house, and but it's got a very modest front to it, and so we're very much influenced by all those experiences that we've had. I don't think, I want to answer your question, Roberto. I don't think that when Tosh says, I mean, when she says you can't do it, you can do it, but it's they're because we have something called an earthquake here. and when you have, buildings that have lots of glass and not very many walls, and you're building sort of post and beam, you have to really make solid buildings. So it gets more demanding, but it isn't impossible to get there. It's not, if somebody says, I want to have that kind of a building, we design that kind of a building, we engineer it properly. Yeah, I mean, so
you just tell the people you're going to need a bigger budget.
Yeah.
You're going to need a little bit bigger budget, but honestly, when it comes to the work that we do, the finish selection and some of the other parts of the building have such a big impact on the cost as well, that if we have to go a little further with the structure on it, it's not so dramatic. It's not so dramatic.
So I want to introduce you now to Scott Hobbs. Scott Hobbs is down there in the and he's a builder of homes in this area. And one thing that struck me, and I wonder if it's striking Scott, is that you guys have a lot of stucco in LA. And I don't think Scott's been asked to make a stucco house maybe ever in Connecticut. How come, Scott? And what's the difference that you see in the construction here in LA versus what we're doing? I mean, awful lot of flat roofs, and we're not doing a lot of flat roofs here.
Well, actually, we're doing a stucco job as we speak right now. So times do change, and we're doing a lot of stuff. And I think, and we're doing a lot of flat roofs. We're seeing much more contemporary / modern construction. It's California with the fire dangers and with the earthquake stuff has, again, special rules. It absolutely has special rules. And meanwhile, I think people out in California, it's depending on the exact location, you tend to be drier. In some places it only rains, for that 1 week out of the year. Whereas in Connecticut, you can of course bet that it'll rain every single day, every week out of the year.
But when I've asked you how much to make me a house like this, I asked the same question of you that Roberto asked. You always say, oh yeah, you need to double your budget, John, to get this kind of modern look. And I say, why?
Well, you've got it's the devil's in the details. I mean, you can do a very simplistic one that maybe you're around 800 a square foot, but then very quickly you start tacking up to 1,200, 13, 14, 1,500 a square foot. I mean, a big reason comes from the glass. So instead of doing, simple, structures on the outside, you're doing very high performance glass. And I think that's one of the issues that came up as far as why have costs increased so much. You go back and look in some of the 1950s. I mean, you got storefront window panes there, single strength glass, huge. Energy was cheap. You didn't have to meet all the codes. So you could do things that were not necessarily really advisable. Trying to get a mechanical system to work well inside of one of these homes is tricky. You don't have a lot of walls. You have a lot more glass. You have a lot more open spaces. And so there's just a lot of details that can make the cost go higher and make the house into something really, really special. So that's a question.
And I just wanted to also add that, houses that have a lot of moldings in them, they're covering mistakes. In a modern house, straight lines, when you look at something that it looks very simple, it's very hard to get to make it look that way because you're trying to hide things, and anyhow, but you have to be much more crafty about it, and that gets to be expensive.
And we're finishing up a monster home right now that has, the long hallways, like over 200 feet long with a lot of turns and twists. And you've got 1/4-inch reveals that go through the whole thing.
Oh my gosh.
And it means every single bit of this house has to be perfect. You can't be off by anything, nothing. I mean, and we have doors that are 10, we have door openings that are 10 feet high and doors that are 9 feet, 11 and 7/8. So I mean, we've got like a 1/16 of an inch top or bottom. It's you can't have a speck of dust in the wrong spot as you're putting something in, or it's not going to work.
Right.
But you know, that is one way of doing modern architecture, and I want to say that distinguishes a little bit from what mid-century modern architecture is. It's not, mid-century modern did allow for mistakes, and that does allow for different textures to happen at the same place and not be so dogmatic about lines being straight. So I want to say there is, I mean, we have now what's contemporary architecture, let's call it, as opposed to modern. We have come to a different place where we want to make things look more sleek. They weren't as sleek then. So I think that's what's the warmth that mid-century modern homes have are because of that, because they allowed for those mistakes. So they allowed, but not, you know, it wasn't covered in molding, but it had some warmth about it, you know, with, you know, mahogany wood panels that you don't see right now in all these new contemporary homes that are just white and gray and black. So that's why I think the mid-century modern is much more in demand for people, because it's flexible. People can see themselves living in it. It's you know, it doesn't have so much custom personality where they have to tear it out and make it their own. They can actually live with what this, you know, the simplicity of the building that was there. So that's why I think they're in demand.
Is there some flavor of intention in mid-century moderns, in the sense that, like, just what you're talking about, it's not perfect. There's a human quality to it. There's an intention for this, where now things are, in some ways, some things are so perfect, they're like machine manufactured, right, and it's cold. I mean, is there a flavor of that too, you know, when you walk in these homes?
Yeah, I think part of it is scale and proportion. Is that you know, a lot of contemporary homes are there, or modern homes. You know, we use these words and they're loaded and they mean different things. And when you say a modern home, you know, modernism started in the early teens, 19. You know, that's when modernism started. So you know, that's a lot of material to cover right there.
Who are we crediting? Walter Gropius? Who are we crediting? Who in the teens?
Well,
you know,
well, the Bauhaus. I mean,
there's international style. I mean, Schindler came from the beginning of modernism, and you know, Frank Lloyd Wright is American modern, which, you know, there's a whole other thing about that.
And
so
Frank Lloyd Wright did the Roby House in 1906, and that is a wholly modern building, and that's almost 120 years old. So, but my point about the mid-century modern houses is that I think, and Tosh was touching on this too, is that there is a sense of scale and proportion in these kinds of homes that make them very much accessible. We're looking at the Roby House now, which is a wildly modern house 120 years ago. But there's a sense of scale and proportion in mid-century modern homes that is very appealing to homeowners, to people that want to have a family and a home and feel comfortable in the kinds of sort of, I'll say modern in quotation homes, where they become very austere and they aren't careful about proportion and scale, and they aren't careful about introducing more organic materials, which are much more pleasing and much more acceptable and much more accepting to people. Those are the kinds of things that make mid-century modern homes appealing, because they understand the scale of a person living in them, and even you know, the house that we have in Thousand Oaks, which was this Quincy Jones house, which was it was a 1900 square foot house. We added a little bit of square footage to it. It had 4-foot overhangs that went all the way around the building. You know, this is the master bedroom looking out into the rear yard. The bottom of those beams are at 7 feet.
right.
They're 9 inches above my head. So I mean, in any other world, that would be a squatter's house, you know. In this house, it feels like you have this really comfortable, lightweight, almost like Tosh said, tent-like structure over your head that covers you. When you sit in this room, in the living room by the fireplace, and it's raining outside, and it's raining in your courtyard, and it's raining out the windows to the other side, there isn't a better feeling. There is not a better feeling than.
But you also, you know, look at all the structural pieces. These were standard wood members that they could buy. I mean, everything was designed around what was available at the time to build really quickly.
They didn't customize it.
Nothing is
Yeah,
customized.
they just put it together, and then they put some P&G 2x decking on the roof, and they were done.
It was almost like an IKEA thing where they really came up with a system of construction, beams at 7.5 feet apart, 7 feet, 7 feet apart. You know, that's how you run this. There is no attic space. The roof decking is your ceiling as well. So it went really, really quickly.
Yeah.
So I mean, they figured it out how to build homes very fast after World War II.
And at the same time, there's a kind of elegance about them.
There's no stucco here.
That I think that people recognize, maybe unconsciously, they recognize the elegance of them, you know, without using very costly materials and the like. It sort of floats. The light is nice, and I mean,
Now,
you must feel the response of people who chase the Neutras and the Schindlers and the Quincy Jones and the few. There's Frank Lloyd Wright. There's a Frank Lloyd Wright house in Brentwood. There's a serious appeal to these things for people.
I think as far as scale, that's my favorite design element, and scale is everything to me. But I think also the ease of living in these homes, they're just easy. Living is easy. But also I think the aesthetic, I think that the furniture of that era, you know, mid-century modern furniture, you know, Saarinen tables and you know, Ames chairs and so on. Everything was just so sexy, you know, that the way that there was just a really nice nuance, you know, in these homes that just made them appealing and in demand.
So when people come to town, a guy like me shows up and it says, I picked Brentwood. I think I want Brentwood because I like the neighborhood to raise a family, and I like the schools. Can you find me? What do they ask for? They ask for private backyards. Do they ask for a modern? Do you have something in a modern? For a long time in Connecticut, that was a dirty word. Everybody says, I want a colonial. I want a center hall colonial. And we have center hall colonials with pitched roofs. And it was only a minority of the requests came in for modern design. Would you say most of the people coming out to LA want that LA design, be it mid-century or current?
Yeah, I think that people, when they come here, they want the California dream, but I think more importantly, they want the backyard. You know, land is always in demand. But yes, I think that modernism.
And a pool?
Well, a pool, but I don't see too many MCM pools here anymore. I don't. I just see, you know, people sometimes will just do new construction. I would tell you a lot of this modern farmhouse construction is kind of taking over. So, but you know,
LA?
Yeah, in these areas, just because it's new. But for the enthusiasts who do want it, yeah, I mean, it's here. And but I think more than anything, they want the backyard, whether there's a pool or not.
So how big are the lots? What is a plaza? I mean, is it a half-acre lot?
No, not that. Well, it just depends. I mean, because we do have a lot of hillside terrain. It could be less than a half acre. So
I want to interject here because I have about a minute and a half, and I do want to thank our sponsor. I mentioned before Grace Farms. I want to mention it again. I'm going to hit share screen briefly, and I'm going to show you the sauna building. Okay, this is the river building that they designed. It's incredible. Sauna is an architecture firm out of Japan. They won the Pritzker Prize for this building, and it is an amazing building. The nonprofit Grace Farms in this building has got the Design for Freedom. The way we can all support it is by ordering at gracefarms.org this very attractive box with coffee and tea. These are the sips.
30 seconds.
Those are the sips, and those are the drips as our closing gifts. And all profits go toward the Design for Freedom effort, which is for sustainable and ethical treatment of in building materials. We're going to continue the conversation, even though they're going to cut us off on Voice America. I want to thank Scott and Raybar and Sheila and my co-host Roberto and my guest Scott Hobbs. Thank you all for episode 87.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And we're clear. Great show. I'll let you guys continue. Have a fantastic week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. So,
What I want to, you were talking about zoning and lot size, or Roberto was talking about lot size. You know, new laws dictate that now when someone moves, your lot could be susceptible to a two home lot because of the housing crisis. So now there's two homes actually on one lot on San Vicente. And this went up about 3 years ago, and it's the first one that I've seen. But now with zoning, you can have two homes on one lot. So to answer your question, the lots are getting smaller.
well, that's the accessory dwelling unit rule, right? That you're talking about?
No, this is a full house. Both of them are a full house, but you can have an ADU, but it could be smaller. But I'm talking about two homes on one lot. I think it's east of Carmelina on San Vicente. I think it's 11287 and 12287 and 12285. They have their own addresses, but they're on one lot.
I was just curious because John had asked if the yard was really the attraction, and you said yes. So I'm just wondering how big those yards can actually be.
Yeah, it's there's, I don't want to say, there's really no rhyme, no reason. So you just never know what you're going to get. They're not that big unless you're up in Brentwood Country Estates. That's where Arnold Schwarzenegger lives. That's where Dr. Dre lives. And I think there are like 6 other parcels up there. You know, they have the bigger lots, but those are, you know, in a gated community and hard to get. And Scott, I'm so sorry I mispronounced your last name. My mind just went blank. So
I didn't even notice. So it was great.
I did. I'm so sorry.
Well, I am Scott Strumwasser, and my partner is Tosh Rabar.
Right. Well, I remember her spelling, but my mind went blank on your last name.
That's right.
So is that wreaking havoc, all these new zoning laws wreaking havoc on the real estate market? It seems to me, and insofar as it relates to mid-century modern preservation, that if zoning laws allow 2 houses where there used to be allowed 1, it puts even more pressure to knock down a house like the one we just saw, the single level house on Stoddard, and replace it with 2 bigger houses. Is there a tendency to knock down the mid-century moderns? We're finding that problem in New Canaan, Connecticut.
I think there's a map that details where these homes are located. I think that, you know, there's some kind of formula where you can only do maybe 1 in 3 block row, but this goes back to SB 50. I don't know if people remember that. I don't even know if people know about this. They do know about ULA, but SB 50 dictates that you can now build, a builder can come in and build, I think, up to 8 units, you know, in a building. There will be no parking. And it just puts many restrictions, but what it's trying to do is open up for affordable housing. So you can have a $12 million home in Brentwood Park, and someone 2 doors up from you moves, well, a builder can come in and build, you know, an 8-unit structure. And it's.
You know, I'm not sure if that's, I'm not sure about what we understand and from our work, and we've done many of these. John, you referred to the ADU. It's just what we know about is that for what's called an R1 property, zoned R1 for a single family residence, the state of California has mandated that R1 properties, single family properties, are obligated to permit a second dwelling unit on it, called an accessory dwelling unit. It's limited to 1,200 square feet. It has other restrictions. It's eased the requirement for parking, but all of this is in an effort to address a wildly out of control housing shortage in the state of California. And I think from a real estate point of view, there's been a lot of concern about this because it's changing characters of neighborhoods. I think there's ways to do this in responsible ways, and there's architectural opportunities that are available that they're one of our projects. We worked on the main house for a client in 2015, and 5 years later, they came back to us and asked us for an ADU. We used their property sort of responsibly, and now they have a second unit on it, and it doesn't feel like the neighborhood's changed. It feels like it has an accessory building on it that's carefully designed, and but yeah, it's impactful and it's profound. It is profound because the idea of a single family house and that whole concept is a little different. It's a little different now.
But if they build an 8-unit building, they're just not going to have a place to park. So I think everyone's concerned about parking on the streets and so on, and the congestion that it's going to.
Yeah, but LA is changing now. We have other forms of transportation that are starting to develop, and we have the commercial Uber and Lyft, and so parking cars are.
Yeah, parking requirements are a relationship of how close you are to public transportation. And that changes depending on what neighborhood you are.
Yeah, it permits you to limit the parking. But yeah, there's a lot of issues that are involved in all of this. But it's we're the state is trying to address the fact that there's lots of people that want to live here and there isn't enough places. Right. There isn't enough housing. Yeah.
Are all those ADUs going to bring the average price down from $3.4 million in Brentwood? Is that going to come down?
They're going to raise it because they're being used not just as rental units, but they're being used as mother-in-law units. They're being used as offices within your house, within your property, because a lot of people are working from home. Caregivers can live there. It provides an enormous amount of flexibility from the perspective of architects that have worked for decades, remodeling and building new residences. The ADU laws have been a good thing. They have been a good thing for us. Yeah. They provide work, but we recognize that for homeowners that live in a single family residence, it changes character. It changes something fundamental and profound about the idea of having your property in a single family residence. You cannot build 8 units on an R1 lot. You can build 2. And we've always felt that, if you're responsible and you're a qualified and talented architect and designer, you can make something that's that will raise the value. It will not lower the value.
We're not talking about rural housing here.
No, that's not it. But it's my understanding that they can build like an 8-unit building.
That's not correct.
Really. No. So that's you. We're not talking about SB 50. Are you all talking about SB 50?
I don't know what
I think SB 50 you can.
But it's not an R1. R1 lots can have a second unit. They cannot have 8 units. They can have a second unit.
Right. I have a client on Gorham here in Brentwood, and they have R2 zoning. They rent out both homes, but I do think that with SB 50, I'm not 100%. We're still in the infancy stages of it. It just passed a few years ago. I think that eventually they can do the 8-unit buildings, but. That's just my understanding. I don't know. I could be wrong.
So back to the economics, the $3.4 million median in Brentwood is going to go up, not only because of ADUs, but because the California economy is doing so well. I mean, we've been hearing that there's been some cracks in the, that there's been some anxiety over the market in California. Is it misplaced anxiety?
Well, there's just no inventory. No one wants to, they're not putting their home on the market, and I'm sorry, someone's trying to come in. Hi. Yeah. And, yeah. But
Remember, John, they have also are instituting transfer taxes there.
well, yeah, that's a ULA. 5,000 to 10,000, or I'm sorry, 5 million to 10 million. There's a 4% increase in the transfer tax. Above 10 million, it's 5.5%, I think. But in Santa Monica, it goes from 5 to 8 million. And I think we just discussed this. I think there's like a 3% increase from 5 to 8 million.
But your prediction is that prices will continue to go up in California, despite the high cost of living, despite the challenging political situation where people are like, I'm out of here, I'm going to Texas. Despite all of that and high gas prices and so many other things, you're confident prices are going to continue to go up in the LA market.
Yes, they appreciate. But what happens is we have tech here. We have had an exodus of 500,000 people. But I think those are, that's first-time families in middle America who go for a better life somewhere in Idaho. But I think that the homes here will continue to be in demand, and with the tech people, the concern is buyers and their buying power. So I think, the lenders, they have programs for first-time home buyers, but it's just getting them to bite.
See, in Connecticut, we lost all the very rich people. They all went down to Florida. And I thought all the really rich people left California and went down to Austin. So
well, you do have that. You do have the Elon Musks and other people. But I mean, still tech here, I think pretty much dictates the market. That's just my opinion. That's what I see.
So Brentwood's still a good investment and should be for the next several years.
I think so. Brentwood is a fabulous neighborhood, and Scott and Tosh can attest. And another, we're always compared to Pacific Palisades. Also, that's west, and you have ocean views of Pacific Palisades. But speaking of topography, it's hilly in Pacific Palisades. That's why I like Brentwood. It's just because it's flat. You were talking about scale and MCM. It's just the ease of living. I love this area. And when you hear about us globally, people always say the Tony neighborhood of Los Angeles. Brentwood is a Tony neighborhood of Los Angeles. And I think we are, but I think it's the Mayberry feel. It's, the unassuming areas, but still it's a high net worth, and you have all the amenities. We have great restaurants. We have Voltaire, which is, I don't want to say it was a Michelin star, but they were Michelin honored. Does that make sense? Anyway, we have, great restaurants and a lot of playgrounds. Brentwood Country Mart is really nice. Parents love to take their families there, their kids there. They have toy stores, bookstores, and chicken, Ready Chick. It's just, it's family oriented.
Well, thank you. Now I'll let Scott and Tosh make their, any closing remarks, and I'll let Roberto and Scott tell me what they learned this hour. So go ahead, Scott.
I guess thank you for the invitation to participate in this. For myself, it's, the subject matter of Brentwood, hits home. It was my home. It's where I grew up. And, Tosh and I have done many projects in that neighborhood, and, mid-century modern projects have been very influential in our careers. Feel like we were a good fit to participate in this, and thank you all for letting us be a part of this.
Great. Thanks for coming. It's wonderful. I
Thank
think that Brentwood is it like Sheila was saying that the American, the California dream is really alive in Brentwood. You can find it there.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. And I wouldn't want to be in any other neighborhood. So there's something for everyone here in Brentwood.
And Tosh?
Not for everyone in Brentwood. I want to make sure that we all understand, the annual income in Brentwood is not,
There's South Brentwood. There are condos here and there are apartments. So we do have, that rental community and the condo community in South Brentwood.
right.
But if you're young and you want more land, then yes, maybe it's not, you want to seek elsewhere, but
Right.
the mobility is fabulous here, with San Vicente and all the shops. It's just easy. I find it's easy if you're in New York and you want a nice neighborhood where you can just walk around everywhere and not need a car. Brentwood is your area. So
Right. It's a beautiful neighborhood,
It sounds like paradise. I mean, I have a new appreciation for it.
Yes,
That's gonna have to come out.
Come and visit, John.
I will. Thank you.
Tosh,
Thank you, Sheila. I will visit. Thank you, Scott, Tosh. And
Thank
thank you again, Roberto, for another fabulous hour, Boroughs and Burbs. Next week, we are in Aspen, where none of the architecture is going to look like what we just saw. No single pane glass, no flat roofs, and no swimming pools, I think. I don't know. We're going to meet the mayor of Aspen, Torrey, and we're going to learn all about the explosive Colorado market. So till then, thank you all and see you next week.
Bye, guys. See you, Skipper.
Bye-bye. Bye.